How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Reel Nothern Bass. We're about to hit that magical point of the year where the water temperatures actually start climbing and consistently, so it's going to start really driving the feed bag on a lot of these fish. When it comes to this time of the year, when we get that warming trend, there's a couple of very key types of areas I like to key in on for some of my biggest fish, and it's been pretty consistent for me almost every single year. So what I want to do is kind of give you a quick breakdown of some very specific areas that I like to target that has yielded me some friggin' incredible results over the years. Before I get into it, do me a favor, if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe, whether you find the videos helpful or at least enjoyable. Leave a like on the video because that helps immensely for driving traffic. Leave a comment too. Like literally any questions, I answer every single comment that I get on the channel. Unless you're asking for a spot, I'm not gonna help with that. So taking this approach is gonna help narrow down a lot of your choices for those that are going out in the water. It is currently Friday, April 12th when this video is posted. I am literally talking about what's gonna hopefully happen this afternoon, Saturday and Sunday, and probably for the next couple of weeks as well. I did say it's going to be very specific, but it's also broadly specific. Keep that in mind. I really do think it's going to help you for when you get out there, and I really hope you stick a giant. But let's get into some really kind of wonky map study pictures that I have for you. Alright, so first up is what I would consider a very generic run-of-the-mill kettle pond that you can find not only all over the Northeast, but pretty much anywhere in the northern half of the country as well. I love bodies of water like this at this time of the year because they have the benefit of being generally pretty small. I'm focusing on areas that are 200 acres or less, and their average depth is not that deep. We're talking maybe 15 feet on the max depth for the average, sometimes 20 feet, but really like 10 to 15 feet is kind of where I'm looking for. These bodies of water, because of their size and their relative shallow average depth, are going to warm up the fastest. And as I record this again on April 12th, what we have right now coming for a weather pattern is a ton of much warmer weather, warmer than we've had in the last several weeks, and at this point pretty much all season, and a ton of warm rain coming with it. And every time we get to this time of the year with this kind of weather pattern, this exact kind of pond that we're looking at, that I've whitewashed, I have no idea what place we're looking at, I don't want to blow up anybody's honey hole, this is what I look for, and far more often than not, it proves to be very successful for me, either getting numbers or quality, but more often than not, this is where I'm going to find my quality size bites. So as you can see, in general, not a very big body of water. To give it a scale, it's about 120 acres in size, but you can get an idea as to what we're looking at for average depths. The whole middle is pretty much just a giant wide open bowl. There's nothing really special about it and very distinct. But what you do have on both the top left and bottom right sections are large, expansive, shallow flats. And that is what I'm looking for more often than not when I'm trying to find some of my better spots right now. I want those big expansive flats, but more than anything, I want vegetation on them, and I'm looking for very key types of vegetation at very specific depths, and the reason for that is because that has been the most consistent thing I have found to get the best bites that I always find right now this time of the year. So going from your Navionics or really any other app that you can find that provides you depth charts, now we're getting kind of that stripped down version of Google Earth. Google Earth, when you pull it up on your desktop, on your computer, your PC, whatever you want to call it, you can go back in time to see satellite imagery at different times of the year. And this is really beneficial in this case where I'm specifically looking for a very particular type of vegetation that I can target. So I need to go back into this when I'm looking for new bodies of water so I can see where are the lily pad patches. Because by far the most common aspect of where I find the majority of my fish and my best fish when we have that warming trend is anywhere I can find lily pad patches. And in this case, this pond has one very, very well-defined area, which thankfully for us, happens to be along that wide, shallow area on the top left corner. Zooming in a little bit, trying to make it as painfully obvious as I can, you can see in this somewhat good quality resolution image that there are lily pads. Very, very clearly seen, defined lily pads on the top end. Why is that important? Those lily pads don't necessarily go away in the winter, but the stalks, the stems that make up the lily pads, all just kind of fold over and lay on themselves, and they stay there all winter and into the spring. It's a nice, solid structure for bait fish to hide in as that water temp starts to warm up, and especially like this week where we had a very strong warm up over a very short period of time. They want to get up warmer, shallower, where that warmer water is. And those bait fish need places to hide. Those lily pad patches offer some of the best structure for them to hide in. And where the bait fish go, the bass follow. So I like to find areas where there are very, very clearly defined lily pad patches over a wide expanse of shallow water, not necessarily inches of water. Ideally, I want to find it anywhere from 1 to 3 feet of water. That is like the absolute most magic range. If you can find it where it's covering that depth range over an expansive area, then I really don't think you need to look any further. That's if you have just enough of a warming trend. If you don't, then ideally what you want, which is exactly what this pond has to offer, is on the very outside edge of where those lily pads lie, where they end at 3 feet. It drops down to 3.5 all the way out to about 6 feet for a very long period. So even though we've had that warming trend and it's pulling the fish up, you might have conditions like we're about to have, say, exactly today, where it's overcast, very warm rain though, and the wind is going to be blowing up in that direction. They might not be all the way up in the pads, but they probably were just the other day. They're not going to pull out that far because we didn't really have a cold front that would push them out that far. So that's why I have such a wide area circled, because if they're not up in the lily pads, then I'm going to pull back about 100 to 150 feet, and I'm going to work that next depth range, that like 4 to 6 foot range. They're going to be in one of those two spots 90% of the time. And again, it's very specific, but also a broad general rule of thumb of where you could be looking, that I think this is one of your highest probabilities for success. Now, flipping the script and going down to the bottom, this is a little bit harder to see, but if you remember back on the depth chart, I'll show you really quick, down here at the bottom, you have an area that's a little bit deeper than everything up on the top area that I was talking about. Same body of water. Going back to the imagery, maybe you can kind of see it. There is a lot of deeper vegetation here that comes all the way up to the surface. It's anywhere from 6 to 8 feet in this general area. A lot of this is milfoil, but then there's a lot of pond cabbage as well. A lot of this does die off into the winter, but it doesn't completely go away. And it kind of, doesn't necessarily stand up, but it's still kind of present there, and it comes up at least a couple of feet. So what you get is, in some of these areas, anywhere from say 6 to 8 feet deep, you have a significant amount of vegetation that is coming up about 2 to 3 feet off the bottom. And what that gives you is anywhere from 3 to 5 feet of open water over the top of that. But you have this wide area of all of this vegetation in this mid-depth range that is separating the fish from their wintering holes to the shallow banks where they are eventually going to be pushing up here in just the next few weeks or maybe a month. It is like that perfect first staging area for bass to come out of their cold winter holes and getting ready to move up towards the bank. All the bait fish are going that way, and all the bass are just going to keep following them. So if they're not up in that kind of next tier of shallow area, and especially in that really shallow area of the lily pad beds, then this is the next area that I'm going to look at. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to try and scope out all that open water. And I don't necessarily mean actually like live scope or forward-facing sonar. I mean just go out and start fishing the heck out of it. Ponds like this, if you're already familiar with them, you have a general knowledge of what bodies of water have, and you know that they have this 1-2 punch. You got that shallow lily pad stuff at the top, and you got this kind of mid-depth range vegetation down the bottom, then that's awesome, especially on overcast days with that warming trend. Now, if the sun starts peeking out, like it's probably going to on Saturday, Sunday, and especially into next week, they're going to push way up on the bank. And some of those fish might be ready to bite, and some of those aren't. That's why these two areas are extremely critical as well to keep in mind, because while you might get up on the bank, if you start seeing a bunch of fish cruising, but you cannot get them to catch, you back up a little bit to these two areas that I mentioned, and you're more likely to find biting fish out in these areas. So just keep that in mind as you're getting out there this weekend. Just to give one other example, and I'm going to give a very specific pond because nobody cares about this place, it's not that good, but it offers 3 of the things that I look for in a different kind of body of water for different opportunities that I can't find in the first one that I showed you. It's Petanapone in Brookline, New Hampshire. There's nothing special about it, despite it, the state record, allegedly, came out of there back however many decades ago. What this body of water has that the first one I showed you didn't, is that it very clearly has an inlet up at the top. And even though you can't see it, but I can point it out here, especially with my little hand-drawn line there, there is an outlet at the bottom. I love fishing bodies of water that have a very well-defined wide inlet at this time of the year, especially when we get those first few warm rainfalls. Now, it's critical that any snowmelt that we have is already well and gone. because if it's not, and you have a good amount of snow that's still sitting on the ground in the woods around the area of your stream, even though you might be getting warm rain like we are currently today, where it's going to be mid-60s and pouring rain, it's going to bring in all that snow melt. It's going to not have as dramatic of an impact. Versus now, we've been snow-free for a week. All that is going to be rushing into that inlet is that warmer rain water, and it's going to warm up the inlet incredibly fast. That's going to pull up all the bait fish and then all the bass. That's what it's all about this time of the year. You're following the bass because the bass are following the bait fish, and they're going to want to go up there. And that's why I have this whole general large area at the top that's really highlighted, because it offers all the stages that you want to cover in the event that maybe it doesn't quite get as warm as you would hope for. They might not be all the way up in that inlet, but they might be just on the outside. And if you can find a spot like this, again, where, you know, it's a kettle pond and it's not really that deep out in the middle, the majority of the middle doesn't offer a ton of exceptionally deep water, you can come out to the outside of that inlet a little bit, and you can find yourself tackling it either up those banks and the transitions. That would be like kind of the deeper, colder phase 1, I'll call it. Then phase 2 would be up in like that 5 to 8 foot range, where they're kind of moving up on the next stage of flats. They're starting to get a little bit of that current as it's coming out from the inlet, or maybe they're just working the vegetation on the outside edges. They're staging up, they're ready. They can feel that water temperature is just starting to change. Or you get really lucky, you get your timing right, the weather's great, and in this case right now it's looking to be that way for later end of this weekend and certainly early next week, where you're going to get significantly warmer weather, and those fish are going to really want to push up way into that shallows. So you have that 1-2 punch here, where up in the inlet, if everything's playing right, you're going to have a lot of warm water coming in. The other side of it is thinking about wind and everything, and how all that warmer surface temp water is going to move, and that's why I bring up the outlet. Coming back to that image, if you have, in this case, this being on the southern end, a lot of north directional wind, so coming out of the north, blowing into the south, it's going to continuously pull all of that warmer surface temp water, especially on these sunny days, and it's going to drive it with the current and the wind all the way down toward that outlet. And what that's going to do is you're going to have this area of much warmer water than you'll find anywhere else on the lake, because that's all it's doing. The wind and the weather and everything is just helping drive and funnel all that warmer water down to a smaller area to then only hit that smaller choke point of the outlet. And we've seen that a lot on bodies of water that do have a proper inlet and proper outlet that is providing good current. I will find that down at the, literally at the very end of the outlet, you will be several degrees warmer than anywhere else on the lake. Sometimes this is phenomenal. I would actually say more often than not, it is like really, really good. And that's where I'm going to find the majority of my fish. Then there's other times where it really does absolutely nothing to help you whatsoever. More often than not, though, this is really good. It's all condition dependent. That brings me back to my main point about why it is that I bring up these two bodies of water. They're small. They're going to warm up fast. The conditions, the ideal conditions for these fish to get fired up are going to happen a lot faster than you will in your bigger, deeper bodies of water. Not to say that some place like Champlain isn't on fire, because I know it is for a fact right now. But if you're out there, you don't have the time to go up to that bigger lake. You don't have the vessel to do it. That's what I like about focusing on smaller bodies of water like this, especially for sharing this information with everybody here watching. Anybody can go out and fish these, and they can find that same level of success that anybody else can. So yes, bigger bodies of water, absolutely. You can still go out and crack them and find those bigger fish, even though they're not warming up as fast. But for your best chance of trying to break down several different key depth ranges and types of areas, you settle in on a smaller 150 acre body of water where the average depth is only about 12-15 feet. As we're having this consistent warming trend, water temp going up, you're much more likely to find a consistent pattern much more easily and quicker. One last thing before I go, I gotta bring up baits and techniques while we're at it. If you get out there, like the very first thing I personally am gonna be throwing, I'm gonna have a three-tiered punch. I'm gonna have a jig, so I can pick apart structure, whether it's hard structure or vegetation. I'm going to have a suspended jerkbait, just in case I do have to back out a little bit and fish that kind of mid-level water column, that 4 to 8 feet range, we'll call it. And then I want a bladed jig, or spinnerbait, or swim jig with a swim bait trailer, whatever trailer you want on the back. Any one of those three things where I have just that reactionary bite, but I want a bigger presentation. And more often than not, it's the bladed jig is what's going to get it done for me. If the wind is absolutely ripping, then I will 110% go with a spinnerbait and a bladed jig, because you never know which one they really want. Bladed jig is still much more consistent for me, as that water temp is closer to high 40s, low 50s. However, if you really want to swing for the fences and you find yourself now all of a sudden in low 50-degree water and you know that it's had a significant warm-up, now is the time to start throwing your big swim baits as well. Some of my biggest bites and consistent bites, like days where I've gotten a ton of bites on a big bait, you know, we're talking like a 6-inch hard body crankdown or an 8-inch soft body swim bait, is right now, when you get that water temp swinging high 40s, low 50s. And they've already made that transition up to at least that middle stage. Maybe not all the way up in the bank, but they're at least halfway out. That was the time. That's it. I wanted to keep this pretty straightforward. We've covered this a million different ways on the channel over the years, but I saw a unique opportunity that I could address it very specifically and show some very specific examples and get it out the morning of the weekend that it would most benefit all of you. So I hope you find this helpful. If you don't leave a comment beforehand, please, if this worked for you, come back to the video and let me know in the comments. I would love to hear how you all did. Or if you follow me on Instagram too, like whenever I post, if you guys just want to share how you did as well on there, we'd greatly appreciate it. Other than that, this probably went on for a heck of a lot longer than I meant to, but there was a lot to pack in a little bit of time. Thank you all very much for watching. We'll catch you guys in the next one.